It has been 12 years since Harry Roy Vivers, an eccentric British property developer, died mysteriously at his Nyali home here in Kenya. But his body still lies in a mortuary, unburied, untouched, unresolved. This episode is not really about murder, but investigations into a possible foul play. The last 10 years have been chaotic runs in courtrooms between two families accusing each other of things, many things, including murder. The murder of a builder who relocated to Kenya to start a multi-million shilling property business. Top of the contest is who takes his body and why. I am Brian Obuya. Welcome to the program, the Billion Shilling Corpes. And so, it begins. He came to Kenya with a dream. A man with no cape, no crown. Just a vision and a will to build. From the seaside estates of Nyali to dusty backrooms of Mombasa law courts, Harry Roy Vivers carved an empire worth over $1 billion shillings. Land, houses, name it. He owned pieces of paradise. But the legacy he left behind was anything but peaceful. Two families, one man and one death. And a fortune so vast, it split blood into bitterness and kin into courtroom enemies. From one marriage in England, Harry fathered sons Richard and Philip. From another life in Kenya, he gained a second family, Azra Parveen Dean and her daughters Alexandra Vivers and Helen Vivers. And for years, the two sides rarely crossed paths until Harry died, suddenly, quietly, on Valentine's Day in 2013. They buried him almost immediately, without an autopsy, no questions asked. But when the sons returned from the UK, they didn't come to grieve. They came to accuse of poison, of cover-up, of murder. This here is the story of a man who built wealth that outlived him, a family feud that won't go away, and a body that 12 years later still hasn't found rest. In this story, we have interviewed Richard Vivers, the firstborn son of Harry Roy Vivers, and advocate Kinyua Kamundi, who represented the sons in the inquest. Murder Tapes has, over the last 1 year, reached out to the Vivers daughters Helen and Alexandra for an interview, and they have consistently declined. At one point, accusing us of working to foster the interests of their half-brothers. Again, welcome to the program. This is Murder Tips, the Billion Shilling Corpes. It was on Valentine's Day in 2013 when British tycoon Harry Roy Vivers breathed his last in his bed at a palatial home in Nyali, Mombasa County. His second wife, Azra Parveen Dean, who lived with him at the time, explained that her husband had died of natural causes. Harry's children 2 sons and 3 daughters were away in the UK.
I was called by my sister. My elder sister has now passed away, Alison. She'd been called by Azruddin about 5 o'clock UK time, and Azra told her, "Your father's dead, I'm burying him today." And that was it. Nobody called me apart from my sister, so she was very upset. She called me. I then was repeatedly trying to call my father's Kenyan number and to try and find out what was happening. No answer. Everybody just refused to talk to me that was in Kenya, that I knew might be around.
But Roy's death brought the family together and in constant communication more than before. Only that this time around, it was all chaos. This death meant that Harry's children would all be here but one, Alison. It was an urgent matter.
I used to flight, me and my brother, as fast as possible to try and get here. On the same flight, surprisingly, was my half-sister's. His flight had already been booked because the plane was full. When we went to the airport and we got standby tickets. So it was, we didn't bring any luggage, we just brought ourselves to try and get here as quick as possible. When we arrived, we were refused entry to my father's properties. Obviously, I've been here many times, I know where they are.
The half-sisters are Helen Vivas and Alexandra Vivas. The 2 daughters are children of Roy and his second wife, Azra Parveen Dean. Philip and Richard are Roy's children with his first wife, Florence Mavis, whom he had divorced before moving to Kenya to set up a multi-billion real estate empire.
From being very young, I've always got on with Helen very well. Alexandra, for a time, I brought Alexandra up. My father and Azruddin couldn't cope with her. So I said, okay, she can come live with me and see what I can do. So in the UK, before my father's death, we were quite close, especially me and Helen. I was her big brother. You know, she has a problem with a boyfriend, I sort it out. She needs to move house, I sort it out. She needs to go somewhere, a car's not working, I sort it out. She was my little sister. Yeah, and I was proud of her, I loved her. Alexandra has always been a little bit Carly to everybody. But the moment we landed, or the moment we met them at the airport in London at Gatwick, everything had changed. It was like we didn't know them. It was like they were just frustrated with us being around. Yeah, and it was like, especially with the camera thing and the day of unwrapping my father, it's like they treated us with complete contempt and hate. And these people were my family.
On arrival in Kenya, things were about to be very bad, suspicious and strange. The first problem was that Richard and David say they did not know where the body of their father was. Then they visited the mortuary the next day.
So when we unwrapped him, the first thing I noticed is it was pink and purple.
Pink and purple.
Pink and purple, sort of pinky here, red up here, purple here, you know, and I've seen dead bodies, Mzungus, okay, and Marafricans act a slightly different way because we're different pigment in the skin, but the same things happen. If my father's laid on his back or a body's laid on the back, then the blood will sink and it will create a line along the back of the body, which is usually maybe an inch, okay, but this was purple and pink and red, and so we're having a look, and then I'm looking at my brother and like someone's beaten my father to death, and my brother's medical and he's saying, okay, it's not bruising, but I don't know what it is, you're gonna have to calm down. I said, to me it looks like he's been beaten to death, you know, so then I'm really ready to lose my temper. And we unwrap, he looks at his eyes are milky, And then all in his nose and his mouth, it's red. It's like someone's taking a Brillo pad. And at the point when we're going to pick him and turn him to try and have a look at his back, and then Alexandra and Helen come storming in. That day, my brother was taking pictures on his camera because he didn't know what it was. And also being medical, he could send off to his regiment in the army because they're experts in these things and they can tell us. And I got copies and I sent them to a doctor friend in the UK.
These pictures were the beginning of a bad blood relationship between the two families brought together by the passing of their father. But the first suspicions began to show when Roy Harry Vivas was buried as a Muslim. The businessman was hurriedly interred without a post-mortem being conducted to ascertain what killed him. He was buried in a Muslim cemetery.
Biggest reason I can say that I didn't just react at the time is I was just in shock. And I was in shock at how people were reacting, you know, and I didn't have a sure footing. And, you know, if I was in the UK and I need to react, I've got a sure footing. You know, I know where to go here, then, you know, I was an alien in a foreign land, you know, so that's why I didn't react then, and maybe if I would have, maybe I wouldn't be here today. You know? So. Yeah, you can Google my father. He's the founder of the Christian Unity Party in the UK. You know, he never converted. He was very proud of his upbringing, his religion, who he was. You know, it was a big part of him.
But his hurried burial and as a Muslim angered his two sons, Richard and Philip. Then trouble began to become more obvious after it emerged that the death of the Christian man in a Muslim cemetery was never recorded anywhere.
I went to Banbury Police. They told me, no, your father's not dead. We know your father. I said, I know you know my father. This is why I'm here. Yeah, I've come for help. Your father's not dead. I'm showing him pictures on my phone. I'm saying they've buried him in a Muslim cemetery. Well, it's not been reported to us. So then he asked me to go and check Niali and see if it's been reported there. Niali police station, lights, nowhere it's reported.
The report on the passing of Harry Roy Vivas did not exist at Nyali police station either. But that is not the only place where records of his death did not exist.
Then I went to Pandya. Pandya said, your father was never here. The lady on the desk, she's like, no, I'm really sorry. Have you got the right hotel? I said, no, your mortuary's here. I've been to your mortuary. My father was there. I need the record that he was here. You know, the police are asking for it. So then they call one of the management. The management are very nice. They take me to the mortuary. And then we go through the book of where they keep the admissions and the burial permits. So we find no admission, but there is the burial permit for my father, made out to Azruddin. She's not my father's wife. Because I was wondering how are they managing to do all this?
And even at the Muslim cemetery, there wasn't a Harry Roy Vivas.
So I take him to the grave and he says, oh, that's plot number, it's called Akbar, who's buried there. I'm like, no. He said, yeah, Akbar. I said, no, that's Harry Roy Vivas. He says, yeah, Akbar Harry Roy Vivas. They buried him under a false name to allow him to be buried in the Muslim cemetery.
At the time, the two brothers would accuse their half-sisters and their stepmother of poisoning their father. Young and ambitious, Helen was just 25. Her sister Alexandra was 23. And now, things were about to change dramatically. And their lives would never be the same over the next decade. Helen and Alexandra Vivas once envisioned a quiet, ordinary life, stable careers, families of their own, and some sense of peace by their mid-30s. Instead, they began to spend the next decade battling accusations no one could ever truly prepare for: the murder of their own father. The consequences were brutal. If found responsible, they faced possible criminal charges and even imprisonment. The family is torn apart by mistrust. Helen and Alexandra living under the constant shadow of suspicion. Their names smeared and their lives frozen in time. The inquest held in Mombasa has dragged on for years, plagued by mysterious delays and courtroom dramas, including threatening texts from a court clerk to Helen that led to one hearing's collapse. The case began as a murder case against the widow before the then DPP, Keriako Tobiko, ordered for an inquest. The Rochdale brothers arguing that the decision was based on forged evidence.
The inquest has been very long, very protracted, a lot of delays, which are very unfortunate, as we would like to bury our father. He's been in the mortuary since the 31st of January in 2014.
During the inquest, the court heard that on the 13th of February 2013, Harry Roy Vivas was in high spirits. In fact, the final witness in the inquest, Emily Adhiambo, who was the family house help, had told the court that on that day, she arrived at work and immediately Azra, Roy's second wife, asked to be taken to the Reef Hotel where she wanted to spend the day. The inquest heard that 10 hours later, Mr. Roy Vivas died and his body taken to the mortuary within 2 hours. Emily emotionally narrated to the inquest sitting in Mombasa how she had met the property and real estate guru way back in 2012.
Tarehe 13 nilikuwa nimetoka hospitali na mtoto wangu alikuwa mkwe, na nilikuwa nimeandamana na dadangu ambaye sasa hivi ni marehemu. So mtoto wangu alikuwa na pneumonia, alikuwa ameekelewa ile ni ya ukona ya kuongeza dawa na hapa. Tulipotoka hospitali tukaambiana na dadangu tupitie Nakumatt. Wakati huo Nakumatt ilikuwa haijafungwa. So tulipoenda Nakumatt, sababu alikuwa anataka mtoto at least asikue na ile ni hospitali, apasikie kwa mazingira tofauti. Huko ndio mara yangu ya kwanza tulikutana na Mr. Roy Vivas. Alikuwa amekuja huko supermarket pia yeye. Sasa alipotuona interest yake iliingia kwa yule mtoto venye alikuwa hapo na ile plus la bado
chakula danga.
Yes.
Ile drink.
Yeah. So sisi tulipozunguka tukazungumza, saa kutoka sisi tulitoka na peremende moja. Na yeye alikuwa amefanya shopping kubwa. So tulipotoka pale nje, ndiye akauliza nani mama ya huyu mtoto? Nikamwambia ni mimi. Nikamwambia nimetoka hospitali, mtoto wangu asikii vizuri. Ndiye akanambia kuna usaidizi umepata vizuri ya huyu mtoto venye asikii vizuri. Nikamwambia nimeenda tu hospitali lakini sina pesa kwa sababu sina kazi. Hapo ndio tulijuana. Ndiye akanambia naweza kukupatia kazi ili umsaidie mtoto. Na hapo ndio babadilishana na
On the material 14th day of February 2013, she found Roy's second wife home alone and had no idea that Roy himself had died until she knocked on the door upon hearing sounds of someone rearranging things.
Uliona polisi hiyo siku tarehe 14?
Sikuona polisi, mwenye niliona tu nilio guli wenye walikuja. Bas. She didn't say anything stuff.
That question was important because then it laid basis for the prosecution's case.
Wakati anakuambia unataka kinywaji nitasema ni soda Coca-Cola si nini?
Nilimwambia nitakunywa tu.
Sasa ni kama saa ngapi? Saa 3:30, saa 4, saa 5?
Ulipo kama saa 3:30 baada ya kufua.
Unasha boti.
Nishamaliza kufua. Nikaanika, nikaenda kugonga mlango.
Unagonga mlango ndio uingie kusafisha nyumba?
Hapana, sababu ile kelele ilikuwa nikisikia vitu vya kuharana. Sasa alikuwa nataka kuhakikisha wako sawa ndani ama kuna nini.
So alikwambia ngode hivi hapa alete soda, ukaketi ama ukakati umesimama.
Nilipogonga mlango alipofungua, nikamwona ana mshtuko fulani. Kama anatetemeka, ni ana stress. Nikamuuliza uko na shida gani? Akanambia kaa hapo ningojee, naja kukuelezea, lakini kwanza niambiwe anywa kinywaji gani nikaleta.
By now, Emily had already cleaned Harry's clothes and bed sheets.
Hizo bedsheet ulikuwa na moja nani? Marehemu amekufa.
Mimi ni sikujua kwa wakati huo nikifua, kumbuka kwamba sijajua kama amekufa. Mimi nilikuwa naendelea na kazi yangu kama kawaida.
Na. So they asked if when you're washing the bedsheets you didn't know kwamba mwenyewe anakufa.
Sikuwa na habari yoyote kabisa.
It turned out that Azra had employed the services of Dr. Salim Omar, a physician, who declared that Harry Roy died of a heart attack, despite no post-mortem examination having been done on his body. The doctor had erroneously signed a death certificate indicating as much.
Why was the presence of the body at Pandya Memorial Hospital not recorded? I'm supported here by the decision of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board, finding the doctor involved and the hospital liable. Why did the persons of interest have to bribe a doctor to sign to sign a certificate of death with the wrong cause of death? Because if that body had remained at the morgue for an extra day, there would have been a post-mortem.
Harry Roy Vivers was exhumed in 2014, approximately 11 months after his death on February 14, 2013. The exhumation was ordered by court following requests from his sons who disputed the cause of death. The body was removed from its initial Muslim burial site at the Sapphire Cemetery in Mombasa for post-mortem examination. This examination later triggered years of conflicting toxicology reports and legal inquests. The examination, conducted by 3 Kenyan pathologists, including former Chief Government Pathologist Moses Njue, private pathologist Dr. Andrew Gashi, who was hired by the Vivers sisters, established that there was poison in the soils around Roy's stomach in the grave, cyhalothrin, a pesticide. A finding that Dr. Gashi for the sisters disputed.
Remember, there are 3 pathologists, and so there are samples to be collected, firstly from the top of the grave, the dry soil, then dig down, get samples from the body, a lot to decomposed at that time, 9-11 months, 6 feet under, and the wet soil under the body. And so each doctor would collect samples at this level. And every package Tupperware would be sealed, and the seal will be countersigned by each of those pathologists to maintain integrity so that people don't switch. All right? So tests were done. The government took the samples to the government chemists. A poison was found. It's called karate. It's a rat killer, whatever it is. And so there was a determination that Harry Roy Vivas was poisoned to his death. So the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, Mombasa, forwarded the file to the DPP Mombasa for decision to charge and prosecute. But the DPP said, no, there is a report here from a UK scientist, Dr. Richard Alexander Allan, and someone else called Mr. Sykes, that the presence of that person was not detected from the samples sent to the UK. And on that basis, the DPP decided, nah, let's have an inquest instead.
Government chemist Stephen Weibe told the court that the poison was concentrated and could not have leaked from the surface. This followed an argument by the Vivas sisters that there was no poison, and if there was any, then it was placed after the fact. About 9 months after that finding, Helen and Alexandra sought the services of British forensic expert Dr. Richard Alexander Allan for toxicology analysis of the soils and tissues that were harvested from Roy's grave. Dr. Allan's report discounted the possibility that Roy was poisoned. That report even said that no traces of cyhalothrin pesticide were detected after the exhumation. And Richard's advocate agrees with him for one reason. But that wasn't the only problem.
Fast forward to the date those scientists from the UK testified. The chain of custody had many issues, but most importantly, the specimens that were taken from the body and from the grave never made their way to the UK. They were switched into other different containers. The seals were not there. When Mr. or Dr. Sykes testified by Skype, luckily he still has those packages. They are not the packages into which the specimen were put. So nobody knows whether those were human remains, or horse remains, or cattle remains, or whether the soil was from the UK or from here. The DPP had made the decision overruling the DCI on the basis of a report that turned out to have been founded or based on, how to say this, false evidence. Now, we were told in that report, as Dr. Gachie, this is all public record. Dr. Gachie sat on these samples for 4 months until he sent them to the UK. They got there, nobody knows how. And so those were disowned.
The drug dealer being talked about is Baktash Akasha, the heir apparent of the Akasha drug empire that collapsed in New York after years of bravado and unchecked violence and murders in Africa and America. Baktash is said to have threatened Richard with a gun and that he was Alexandra's boyfriend.
They came to me in Mombasa Bar, Masai Bar in the alley. I was invited over to his table. I didn't know who he was. And at the time I'm playing pool. I'm a pool addict. You give me a pool table, I'll be there all night. So after a few attempts, I'm asked to go over by the security, and it's a big Marabu guy, Baktash, and I go over and I say, sorry sir, someone said that you're my friend. I don't think I know you. So then appears Alexandra. He says, you don't know me, but you know my girlfriend. So, and then saying, look, you better leave, you know, there's a restraining order, you know, you better leave, we have an issue, she's not going anywhere. And then he pulls his pistol, he's looking at me. I tell you, Muzungu, who's leaving, you are leaving Kenya. You are leaving, you're never coming back.
That is after the burial.
Yeah, this is after the burial.
But when I met Alexandra and Helen at the Tamarind Hotel in Mombasa, she denied any intimate connection with the drug kingpin. The Vivas family saga is tangled and toxic. Lies, missing documents, disputed forensic evidence, and deeply personal betrayals litter the trail. The sisters and their mother once produced documents to show that their father, Harry, harbored suicidal thoughts and that Harry Roy may have taken his own life because of many issues, including erectile dysfunction. And then there was the missing will and the empty box.
So we discovered that my father had a bank account here, but he had a safe deposit box. Okay, where he kept copies of his passport. There was a copy of my passport in there if needed, and mainly pounds. You know, I'd want cash, because at one point we brought a lot of money over together. You know, before they brought in the £10,000 run. You know, we still had to prove where it came from. You know, but we brought 2 whole loads when we sold our properties in the UK, because we sold one for cash. You see, so. Yeah, we got on the plane and brought it here. So when we finally got to look at the safety deposit box, it was completely empty, nothing. And it's like this big, that wide, nothing in it, not even a sheet of paper. You know, you're not going to pay 1,000 bob a month or 500 bob a month to keep an empty box.
Richard and Helen agree on that fact. Their father was the man who would want to account for every cent. Helen told me at the Tamarind Hotel in Mombasa that his father wouldn't pay for an empty box at the bank, even if it cost a shilling. Her argument was Richard and Philip had stolen the will if it disinherited them.
No, my father, this is going to sound strange and maybe not too respectful, but my father in England, we call him a miser. Okay? He didn't like to spend money. That's how he kept his money. He would happily buy property and things like that, which he would get a return on, but he didn't like to spend money. He wouldn't throw it around. If you walk down the street, you wouldn't believe, you know, he was a millionaire, because he didn't want to give that impression. You know, so he's not going to pay for anything when he doesn't get a return on it, or he's not, you know.
Magistrate Julius Ndegwa, who had most of the witnesses, was tasked with writing a judgment. After a tense and highly charged inquest, more than a decade later, the inquest quietly ended in 2023. And on a random date, when there was supposed to be a mention for compliance of orders to furnish Richard and Vivas with typed proceedings of the court case, a court official took out some 2 pages and began to read out what became the judgment of Magistrate Julius Ndegwa. Helen had called it an anticlimax. Alexandra, with teary eyes, had told Murder Tips on January 24th, 2024 at the Tamarind Hotel that it was not enough for the court to exonerate them, saying that the court did not consider or mention the suffering they had gone through over the decade. With that, Richard and Philip petitioned the High Court.
You have magistrates or judges writing, you know, on pieces of paper. It takes time to be typed. And we're talking about over 340 typed process. You know how much that is? Then you have over 40 exhibits, documents, and each exhibit has many pages. different documents. Yes? So we were told there is a court order, come back on 15th of January 2024 to confirm whether you have received your typed proceedings and when you can do your oral and written arguments. We show up on 15th of January, there is a decision, it's a ruling, written in December, 24th December 2023, a Saturday, 2 days before Christmas, Saturday, by a magistrate sitting who knows where. He's based in Migori. Yes? 23rd December 2023, Saturday, without any notice, without hearing us. You have seen volumes of these, okay? There are, I counted, 28 lines in one page.
The High Court then found that the inquest was irregularly concluded. Lady Justice Anne Coletta Onginyo saying, there is no evidence that typed proceedings were supplied to the applicant's advocate, and there is nothing to show that this file was forwarded to Honorable Ndegwa to consider the evidence of witnesses who testified and write a ruling. What the High Court was essentially saying is that the judgment may have been written without going back to the file to take another look at what the witnesses said. If anything, there is no way the principal magistrate, Julius Ndegwa, would have remembered everything every witness had said over the last 10 years.
Remember, he has locked out all arguments by the prosecution, by the sons of the deceased, and by the advocate representing the girlfriend and daughters of the deceased. Now, then he's complaining that he's been forced to write that ruling. He says he was tasked to prepare the ruling, even though he's not the one who had the last witness. I can speak publicly. He's a senior principal magistrate settling scores with his superiors. If he felt that someone else should have written that ruling, then he should have recused himself.
The High Court judge went further to rule that it was therefore irregular for a ruling to be delivered without notice to the advocates. This court therefore finds that the irregularity needs to be corrected by reopening of the inquest file, allows submissions to be filed, and a ruling written and delivered based on the evidence tendered by witnesses in the inquest and submissions filed. With that, the High Court file was reopened and placed under Senior Magistrate David Odhiambo. Hopefully, he doesn't write his judgment in Swahili. He has done it before. And as the court in Mombasa moves closer to making a second ruling in the inquest, the question of inheritance still looms large. Harry Vivers died without a will, or better still, it was never found. A letter that the two rival families hoped was written to detail his final wishes vanished mysteriously from a bank safety deposit box. The family is now facing another guaranteed legal war over his estate. As of July, the case of Harry Roy Vivers remains enigmatic. No criminal verdict, no burial, no closure. A man of property and planning died on Valentine's Day, and 12 years later, his body still lies in a Mombasa morgue. His legacy torn apart by suspicion and unresolved grief. His story continues to haunt Nyali, unforgiven, unforgotten, and unburied. Thanks for watching. Good evening.